The last transfer. Smash the like button like it owes you money. Subscribe before this story locks you in, and comment if you've got the nerve to hear what happens next. Because once these gates close, there's no way out. The siren cut through the frozen air like a blade. Blue lights reflected off dirty snowbanks as the transport convoy slammed to a halt on the edge of Orenburg Oblast, deep in southern Russia. The lead vehicle skidded sideways, tires screaming, as armed officers spilled out with rifles raised. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the headlights, a man was running, chains clanking, breath tearing at his lungs, every step echoing the same impossible thought. 24 hours. That was all he had left. The fugitive's name was Sergei Volkov, inmate number 74291, sentenced to death for a series of murders so calculated that even veteran investigators struggled to describe them without lowering their voices. For the past 12 years, Sergei had been buried alive inside Russia's most feared penitentiary, Black Dolphin Prison, a place designed not to rehabilitate, not to punish, but to erase. And tonight, something had gone terribly wrong. A prison transport carrying 3 death row inmates to Black Dolphin had lost one, Volkov. As helicopters swept overhead, their searchlights slicing through the night, Lieutenant Alexei Morozov stood beside the wrecked transport van, staring at the open rear doors. Blood stained the metal floor. One set of shackles lay snapped clean in half. That shouldn't be possible, Morozov muttered. Nothing about Black Dolphin inmates escaping was supposed to be possible. Black Dolphin Prison was not just a building. It was an endpoint. Once a man entered, the world forgot him. Located near the Kazakhstan border, it housed Russia's worst criminals, serial killers, terrorists, mass murderers. Prisoners were kept blindfolded during transfers, so they'd never know the layout. Guards outnumbered inmates nearly 3 to 1. Cameras watched every breath. Silence was enforced like law. And yet, here they were. A voice crackled over Morozov's radio. "We've got tracks heading into the marsh. Single subject. Heavy restraints." Morozov closed his eyes for a moment. The marshlands were a death trap, freezing water, sucking mud, no cover. If Volkov had run there, he wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to buy time. Morozov knew the file by heart. Sergei Volkov didn't panic. He didn't act without reason. If he was running now, in the final hours before execution, it meant one thing. There was something or someone he was trying to reach. 12 hours earlier, inside Black Dolphin Prison, the day had begun the same way it always did. Cell doors opened with mechanical precision. Prisoners were ordered to stand facing the wall, hands behind their backs, legs spread. Guards moved down the corridor, faces blank, boots echoing off concrete soaked with decades of despair. Sergei Volkov stood perfectly still. At 46, his hair had gone almost completely gray, but his posture was rigid, disciplined. His eyes, when visible, were calm to the point of being unsettling. No pleading, no anger, just calculation. The guard at his door paused longer than usual. "Inmate 74291, he said. "You've been scheduled for transfer." Volkov's eyebrow twitched. That was it. The only reaction. Transfer meant one thing on death row. The clock had started. Across the prison, Dr. Elena Sokolova, a forensic psychologist assigned to evaluate high-risk inmates, was already reviewing Volkov's file. She had spent 6 years studying Black Dolphin's population, and none of them had unsettled her the way Volkov did. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't cruel for pleasure. He was precise. Volkov had been convicted of orchestrating the deaths of 5 businessmen across 3 cities, murders staged to look unrelated, executed with chilling efficiency. The prosecution argued motive was financial. Elena disagreed. There was something personal woven into the crimes, something buried beneath layers of misdirection. She'd requested one final interview. The warden denied it. "He's done talking," the warden said flatly. "And so are we." But Volkov had requested to see her. That alone was enough to make Elena uneasy. By the time she arrived at the interview room, Volkov was already seated, wrists cuffed to the table, ankles chained to the floor. A thick pane of reinforced glass separated them, though it felt unnecessary. He wasn't violent in custody. He didn't need to be. Elena sat down, recorder off. "You know why you're here," she said. Volkov smiled faintly. "To make sure I'm sane enough to die. That's not my decision." "No," he agreed. "But you're the only one who might listen." Elena folded her hands. "Listen to what?" Volkov leaned forward as far as his restraints allowed. His voice dropped. "They're watching me. Inside this prison." She didn't react. "Who is they?" "The people who made sure I'd never speak," he said. "The ones who think death will end this." Elena studied his face for signs of delusion. She found none. "You've had 12 years to talk," she said. "Why now?" "Because now," Volkov replied, "you're running out of time." The interview was cut short when guards entered without warning. Volkov was removed. Elena protested. It didn't matter. An hour later, she received an encrypted message on her phone. A photo. It showed the interior of Black Dolphin's execution wing, taken from an angle that should not have been possible. Below, it was a single line of text. 24 hours. Ask who benefits. Elena's blood went cold. No inmate had access to cameras. No one outside had access to that wing. The implication was unthinkable. Someone inside the system was helping Volkov. As the transfer convoy rolled out later that evening, Morozov watched from a control vehicle, uneasy. He had overseen dozens of executions. This one felt different. Halfway through the journey, the explosion rocked the road. Not enough to kill, just enough to force a stop. In the chaos, one guard went down. Another screamed. And somehow, impossibly, Sergei Volkov was out of his restraints. By the time order was restored, he was gone. Back in Moscow, Elena stood in her apartment, staring at her phone as news alerts exploded across the screen. Death row inmate escapes during transfer. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "You were right," Morozov's voice said. "He planned this." Elena swallowed. "You need to find him." "We are." "But Elena, if Volkov runs, he runs toward something. Not away." Outside, sirens wailed. In the marsh, Sergei Volkov stumbled, breath ragged, cold burning his lungs. Blood soaked his prison uniform. He didn't stop. In his pocket, wrapped in plastic, was a folded piece of paper, smuggled out over years, names written in tiny script. Guards, officials, doctors, a network. If he died tomorrow, they would live forever. But if he survived the next 24 hours, the truth would burn everything down. And as Morozov's men closed in, helicopters circling overhead, Volkov looked back once, toward the prison that had defined his life. Black Dolphin had been built to silence monsters, but it had also hidden secrets. And when the search team finally caught up to him, dragging him from the freezing mud, they found something that changed the entire case. Strapped to his chest, protected against water and blood, was a flash drive, labeled in neat, deliberate handwriting. Black Dolphin, final hours. And that was when everyone realized Sergei Volkov had never been trying to escape. He had been trying to make sure someone listened before it was too late. The prison that eats its own. By the time Sergei Volkov was dragged back into custody, dawn was creeping over the marshlands like a reluctant witness. His body shook from cold and blood loss, but his face remained unreadable. Not fear, not regret, just endurance. The kind built over years inside concrete walls that never forgave weakness. Lieutenant Alexei Morozov stood over him as medics worked quickly, binding wounds, forcing warmth back into frozen flesh. The flash drive had already been sealed in an evidence bag, passed from one gloved hand to another like it might explode. "What's on it?" Morozov asked. Volkov didn't answer. Instead, he looked past Morozov toward the gray horizon and spoke quietly. "If you open that without protection, you won't live long enough to regret it." Morozov felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Within hours, Volkov was back where the world expected him to be, inside Black Dolphin Prison. Blindfolded, hunched, escorted by 4 guards gripping his arms, his feet barely touching the floor. The prison swallowed him again, its gates closing with the finality of a tomb. But something had changed. The walls hadn't noticed yet. The guards hadn't either. But the system had cracked, and once cracks appeared inside Black Dolphin, they spread fast. Morozov returned to the prison alongside a small, tightly controlled internal affairs unit. Officially, they were there to investigate the escape attempt. Unofficially, they were there to decide whether the story would ever see daylight. The flash drive sat in a sealed container inside the warden's office. Warden Yuri Malenkov watched it like a man watching his own pulse on a monitor. He had run Black Dolphin for 9 years. Nothing escaped his control. Not inmates. Not guards. Not secrets. This stays here, Malenkov said firmly. No copies. No leaks. Morozov didn't argue. He didn't need to. Dr. Elena Sokolova arrived shortly after, escorted through corridors she knew too well. Prisoners stood facing the walls as she passed, blindfolded, hands bound, stripped of identity. The silence pressed in on her chest. Malenkov greeted her with a thin smile. "Doctor, I hear you've been popular lately." Elena met his gaze. "I hear one of your inmates nearly rewrote prison history." "Nearly," Malenkov said. "But he failed." "Did he?" she asked. That was when Malenkov looked away. They gathered in the office, Morozov, Elena, Malenkov, and 2 men whose names were not shared. The flash drive was finally connected to an isolated system, air-gapped, shielded, monitored. Morozov pressed play. The first file opened to video. Grainy. Blue-tinted. Security camera footage. Black Dolphin's execution wing. Elena felt her stomach drop. The footage showed Volkov's cell, time-stamped from weeks earlier. Guards entered, removed him for what appeared to be a routine inspection. But then the angle shifted. Another camera. One that shouldn't exist. It showed a man in a guard's uniform slipping something into Volkov's food tray. Elena leaned forward. That guard paused it. Morozov froze the frame. The man's face was partially visible. Malenkov went pale. "That's impossible," the warden whispered. "He transferred out last year." The name appeared in the metadata. Captain Viktor Lebedev. Internal security. The next video played automatically. A different day. A different inmate. Same guard. Same motion. Different tray. Then audio. A low, distorted conversation. Lebedev's voice unmistakable. "You'll do what you're told. Or you'll die here like the rest." Another voice responded, shaking. "This isn't what we agreed." "It is now." The files kept coming. Documents. Payment records. Prison supply manifests altered by hand. Medical logs falsified. Execution dates quietly moved forward. Appeals mysteriously denied. A pattern emerged, and it made Elena's skin crawl. Black Dolphin wasn't just housing monsters. It was manufacturing silence. The conspiracy reached far beyond one prison. Guards paid to provoke violence. Doctors pressured to declare inmates unfit for appeals. Officials incentivized to accelerate executions for those who knew too much. Volkov hadn't been sentenced to die because of his crimes alone. He had been sentenced because he wouldn't cooperate. Morozov leaned back, his face hard. "He wasn't the worst man here," he said slowly. "He was the most dangerous." Malenkov slammed his fist on the desk. "This is treason. If this gets out, people die," Elena finished. "Including us." They all knew it. Outside the office, Black Dolphin continued its routine. Meals served. Cells cleaned. Orders barked. But the atmosphere shifted. Guards glanced at one another longer than usual. Radios crackled with coded phrases. Someone knew the truth was loose. And loose truths inside Black Dolphin had a habit of disappearing. Volkov sat alone in his cell, wrists cuffed, ankles chained, eyes covered whenever guards entered. He counted breaths. He counted footsteps. He counted the seconds left in his life. 20 hours. Across the corridor, an inmate began screaming, raw, panicked. Then silence. Volkov didn't flinch. He had seen this before. That night, Elena requested permission to interview Volkov again. Malenkov refused. Then I'll go to Moscow, she said. I'll take what we have and burn this place down. Malenkov studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. You have 10 minutes, he said. And you say nothing about the files. The interview room felt colder than before. Volkov was brought in, chained, seated. Elena didn't waste time. You knew, she said. About the executions. About Lebedev. Volkov nodded once. Not at first. Then when? When the wrong man died. Elena's throat tightened. Explain. An inmate named Pavel Markin, Volkov said. Accountant. Money launderer. He testified against a group tied to the state. He was promised protection. Instead, he was transferred here. Volkov's jaw tightened. He begged me to remember his daughter's name. So someone would. What happened? They executed him 3 weeks later. Official cause, exhaustion of appeals. Elena swallowed. And you? They approached me after that, Volkov said. Offered me time, comfort, influence. All I had to do was sign a confession tying others to crimes they didn't commit. And you refused. Volkov smiled thinly. I don't lie to save myself. Elena leaned closer. You escaped to release the files. No, Volkov corrected. I escaped to force you to open them. A distant alarm echoed faintly through the walls. Volkov's eyes flicked toward the sound. They know now, he said. Elena stood. I'll get you out. Volkov laughed quietly. No, doctor. You'll get the truth out. That's enough. As guards moved to take him, Volkov spoke again. There's a second drive. Elena froze. Where? In the prison, he said. Hidden. If this one disappears, the other survives. Where? She demanded. Volkov met her gaze. You already walked past it. The alarm grew louder. Across the prison, a guard collapsed in the corridor, blood seeping beneath his uniform. Another was found unconscious in the control room. Cameras flickered, feeds cutting in and out. Someone was cleaning house. Morozov received the call as he stood in the warden's office. Lieutenant, a voice said, strained. We've got multiple incidents. It's coordinated. Morozov looked at the screen, then at Malenkov. This place is eating itself, he said. By the time security was restored, 3 guards were dead. Officially, accidents. Unofficially, warnings. And in the chaos, one thing went missing. The flash drive. Malenkov stared at the empty evidence container, his hands trembling. They took it, he whispered. Morozov turned slowly. No, he said. You lost it. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering tracks, burying blood. Inside Black Dolphin, Sergei Volkov was returned to his cell. Execution rescheduled for dawn. 6 hours remained. And somewhere within the prison walls, a second secret waited to be found. One that could destroy everyone involved. If Elena survived long enough to find it. Because as she left the interview wing, a folded note slipped from her coat pocket to the floor. She hadn't put it there. It contained only 4 words, written in the same neat handwriting as before. Stop digging. Last warning. And Elena finally understood. The danger wasn't outside Black Dolphin. It was walking its corridors, wearing uniforms, carrying keys, deciding who lived long enough to speak. The last door. The night inside Black Dolphin did not move forward. It pressed inward. Snow hissed against the reinforced windows like static, blurring the world beyond the walls until the prison felt untethered from time itself. Clocks ticked, but they felt decorative, gestures toward a future that would not arrive for everyone inside. Sergei Volkov lay on the narrow bunk, wrists chained to the frame, staring into the dark fabric of the blindfold folded neatly on the shelf beside him. 6 hours had become 5. The machinery of his death was already warming up somewhere beyond the execution wing's locked doors. He could feel it the way sailors felt a storm before the sky changed. Across the compound, Elena Sokolova stood in a storage corridor that smelled of disinfectant and old metal, staring at the note again. Stop digging. Last warning. She folded it, slipped it into her pocket, and exhaled through her nose. Fear sat in her chest like a second heart, beating too fast, too loud. She had spent years studying the psychology of men condemned to die, mapping the contours of their despair. This was different. This fear was sharp, purposeful. It wanted her to move. Morozov met her by the stairwell, his face drawn tight, eyes shadowed. "They're scrubbing," he said quietly. "Logs. Footage. Anything tied to Lebedev." "Eliminating witnesses?" Elena asked. "Or replacing them?" They walked together, steps measured, voices low. Guards passed, faces neutral, eyes unreadable. Everyone was watching everyone else now. Black Dolphin had become a hall of mirrors. "Volkov said there's a second drive," Elena said. "Hidden in the prison. He said I walked past it." Morozov frowned. "That narrows it down to everything." "No," she said. "To places I had access to. Places no one would question me being." He stopped. "Medical." Elena nodded. They reached the infirmary just after midnight. The lights were dimmed, the hum of machines steady, a lullaby for the terminally ill and the quietly broken. Elena moved with practiced confidence, greeting staff, checking charts, making it all look routine. Morozov lingered near the door, pretending to read a notice that hadn't changed in years. She retraced her steps in her mind. The interview rooms. The corridor outside execution wing. The intake area. The infirmary. Her gaze settled on the medication lockers. She opened one. Bottles. Syringes. Labels. Nothing. The second locker. Same. The third. Her fingers brushed something cold and flat behind a false backing. Elena's pulse spiked. She removed the panel carefully, heart hammering, and there it was. A small, sealed drive, taped into the cavity like a parasite. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply closed her eyes for a second and breathed. When she turned, Morozov was already locking the door. "We have to go," he said. "Now." They didn't make it far. The corridor lights flickered, then cut entirely, plunging them into blue-black darkness. Emergency lighting sputtered on, casting everything in an underwater glow. Footsteps echoed. Too many. Too synchronized. Morozov drew his sidearm, keeping it low. "Stay behind me." A voice emerged from a dark, calm and familiar. "Lieutenant. Doctor." Captain Viktor Lebedev stepped into the light, immaculate as ever, his uniform crisp, his expression almost kind. Two guards flanked him, hands resting casually near their weapons. "I was hoping you'd save me the trouble," Lebedev said. His eyes flicked to Elena's coat pocket. "I assume you found it." Morozov didn't lower the gun. "You're under arrest." Lebedev smiled. "For what? Improving efficiency? Maintaining order?" "For murder," Elena said. "For blackmail. For accelerating executions to protect men who pay you." Lebedev's smile thinned. "You think this ends with me?" He gestured, and another figure stepped forward from the shadows. Warden Yuri Malenkov. Elena's breath caught. "You said." Malenkov didn't meet her eyes. "I said what I needed to." Lebedev's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "Black Dolphin exists because the world needs a place where monsters disappear. What you've uncovered threatens that illusion. It invites questions, investigations, chaos." "Justice isn't chaos," Morozov said. "Justice is a story we tell ourselves," Lebedev replied. "Control is what keeps people safe." The guards raised their weapons. A distant alarm screamed to life. For a split second, everyone froze. Then the prison erupted. Lights flared back on. Doors slammed. Shouts ricocheted through the corridors. Somewhere, metal met metal in a violent argument. Morozov lunged, firing once, the shot cracking the air. Lebedev ducked back, shouting orders. Elena ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stop. She burst into the stairwell, taking steps two at a time. The drive clutched against her chest like a talisman. The sound of pursuit thundered behind her. She reached the ground level and skidded into the execution wing. It was quiet there. Too quiet. The door to Volkov's cell stood open. Elena felt her heart drop. She stepped inside. Volkov sat on the bunk, chains removed, blindfold discarded. He looked up as she entered, eyes sharp, alive. "They came for you," she said, breathless. "We have to move." He shook his head. "Not me, Sergey. You need time," he said. "And they'll follow me." Understanding slammed into her like a wave. "You can't." "I already have," he replied gently. "This place only understands sacrifices." Footsteps closed in. Volkov stood, calm as ever. "There's a service corridor behind the execution chamber. It leads to the old drainage tunnel. It won't be guarded. They forgot it exists." "And you," she whispered. Volkov smiled, a real one this time. "I'll give them something to chase." The guards appeared at the doorway. Volkov stepped forward, hands raised. "Gentlemen," he said, "I believe I'm late for my appointment." The chaos that followed swallowed the wing. Shouts, orders, the clatter of boots. Elena slipped away, tears blurring her vision as she ran through the narrow corridor Volkov had described, squeezing through a rusted door that screamed in protest, into a tunnel that smelled of damp earth and iron. She ran until her lungs burned. When she emerged beyond the perimeter fence, dawn was breaking. Pale light stretched across the snow, painting everything fragile and new. Morozov found her an hour later, blood on his sleeve, eyes haunted. "They locked it down," he said. "He didn't make it." Elena closed her eyes. They didn't speak again until they reached a safe house far from the prison's reach. The drive was copied, encrypted, transmitted to multiple secure locations. Journalists, international observers, human rights groups. The truth spread faster than anyone inside Black Dolphin had anticipated. Official statements followed. Investigations were announced. Names were suspended, then quietly retired. Captain Lebedev was found dead in his apartment 3 days later, ruled a suicide. Warden Malenkov resigned for health reasons. Black Dolphin continued to operate. It always would. Volkov's execution was officially recorded at 6 a.m., carried out according to protocol. No mention was made of the files, or the escape, or the hours the system lost control. Elena watched the snow fall from a window thousands of miles away, the weight of survival heavy on her shoulders. Justice hadn't come cleanly. It never did. But the silence had been broken, and that mattered. 3 months later, a body was found in a regional detention center, far from Black Dolphin. The man had been a former corrections official. On the floor beside him lay a folded piece of paper, for words written neatly. "The last door opens." Elena turned off the news, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened screen. Some truths never stop moving. And if this story pulled you into the darkness, remember, there are more waiting just beyond the next door. Subscribe, stay close, and don't miss what comes next.